You're listening to the Cyberwire Network, powered by N2K.
The IT world used to be simpler. You only had to secure and manage environments that you controlled. Then came new technologies and new ways to work. Now, employees, apps, and networks are everywhere. This means poor visibility, security gaps, and added risk. That's why Cloudflare created the first-ever connectivity cloud. Visit cloudflare.com to protect your business everywhere you do business. Hello, and thanks for joining us. In today's N2K Cyberwire Special Edition, N2K Cyberwire's executive editor, Brandon Karpf, sits down with Mike Silverman, Chief Strategy and Innovation Officer at the FS-ISAC, discussing their new white paper, Building Cryptographic Agility in the Financial Sector.
And we are joined today by Mike Silverman, Chief Strategy and Innovation Officer at the FS-ISAC. Good friends of the podcast. Mike, so great to have you on the show.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thank you for having me here.
So what we're talking today about is a recent publication from FS-ISAC on building cryptographic agility in the financial sector, just published in October 2024. And this is coming out, I imagine, for a few reasons. But before we get into the details of this publication, Mike, I'd be really curious, what is cryptographic agility?
You know, it's a funny question. I run the post-quantum cryptography working group at FS-ISAC, which is 30 or so cryptography and cybersecurity experts at financial services firms from around the globe, all working together for this common cause. And actually, the genesis of the paper was there was no definition of cryptographic agility. That's why we actually came together. And it took us 3 months to actually come up with a concise enough definition that made us feel comfortable to share with others.
Okay.
I'll say it's two parts. One, there's the direct piece, which is to be able to swap out a cryptographic algorithm and all of its components, certificates, and other sort of things when needed as a result of a vulnerability or some, a cryptanalysis attack or some sort of reason for needing to switch this cryptographic infrastructure. But the other part is that cryptographic agility is a design principle. It's a maturity that you try to obtain. Today, none of us are cryptographically agile. If we had to switch, it'd be a one-off manual effort. The idea here is that the goal would be, over time, build the capability so that when you switch these cryptographic algorithms and infrastructure, you do so with no or very minimal disruption to the business. That's the ultimate goal, and you have to design for that. That is not something that you can just wave a magic wand or just ask one developer to do. This is an ecosystem, infrastructure, process, and people change to make this happen.
So I think back to when I was doing cryptographic type work and how many pieces of our technical and operational infrastructure were touched by our use of cryptology and cryptographic systems. So when you talk about crypto agility, what are some of these key challenges that organizations face in implementing a change like that? If there's a recent attack or something that affects the integrity of a cryptographic system, for an organization to actually change their use of a system or change their system entirely, what are they going to be confronted with?
How much time do we have on this podcast?
About 6 more minutes.
6 more minutes, right. Well, everything gets touched when it starts to come to crypto agility. It is the code written in applications. It is if we're thinking digital signatures or asymmetric cryptography, we're thinking of all of those keys that need to be rotated or changed from the old to the new. There's questions. Do you preserve the old and put the new on top of that? Do you decrypt and then re-encrypt with the new? There's a lot of challenges to think about that way. There's their certificates and where you store these keys and the parameters you use on these things. There's some consideration of the endpoint. Is this a point of sale device that's very limited in hardware versus a full-blown server? Your point of sale systems may not be able to embrace the newest, latest, biggest algorithms that you want to use elsewhere in your ecosystem. I could keep going, but I think you get the idea. This is a very holistic sort of approach.
This is hard. Yeah, this is hard. And so, why now? What was the genesis, right? Sure, needing a definition of crypto agility, but why is the FS-ISAC publishing this work today?
The biggest reason why we're starting now is, and it's FS-ISAC's raison d'etre, is to preserve trust within the financial services sector. Our system is built on trust, right? You need to know that as a customer of a financial institution, you put money in, you get the right amount of money back out. Institutions need to be able to trade with one another and know that they're going to take the other side of that trade, good or bad, positive or negative. That's the only way this system works, right? So let me go back to the basics. We use cryptography for confidentiality, for integrity, for non-repudiation, for authentication, right? Authenticity. The basics of that is all of those aspects help build to preserve the trust within the ecosystem. Introduce this attack vector of quantum computers. Now, quantum computers have an amazing upside. They will help research in chemistry, in risk analysis, in many different dimensions, solving huge mathematical problems we can't do on classic computers today. There's the downside risk, though, which is when a quantum computer becomes sufficiently large, or a cryptographically relevant quantum computer, or CRQC, it will be able to factor huge prime numbers. And factoring huge prime numbers is the basis for asymmetric cryptography today. RSA is built on that. That is the public-private key on how we establish most web sessions today. If that gets compromised, essentially anyone could be listening in at the start of a web session and be monitoring that traffic going forward. And so for us, that is a huge problem, and we need to get ahead of it. Now, financial services has been through quite a few cryptographic transitions before. Single DES to triple DES to AES, RSA 1024 to 2048, right? There have been these things, but we have always been treating these as one-offs. Just get to the next one, and this algorithm will work for our lifetime. Get to the next one, this will work for the lifetime. And what we're realizing over and over and over again is we should not be taking that as fait accompli anymore. These transitions are going to keep coming. The size of these transitions are just growing in speed, in complexity. The number of endpoints are growing. The amount of electronic transactions that occur versus physical transactions, the speed. Every transition has been bigger and bigger, exponentially bigger and bigger than the last one. And if once we're realizing we can no longer take our algorithms to last 30 years, we need to think differently. And we need to design for the fact that these algorithms are going to change, which is a new concept for us, but we have to design for that. That's what cryptographic agility does, to design, expect these things to maybe fail so that we can preserve the trust within the ecosystem.
That's a very rational approach, right? Thinking that these systems are probably modular, right? How many times have we been burned in the past that these systems that we think are going to be perfectly secure in perpetuity, a few years later, some enterprising engineer effectively breaks them. So I love that approach and that way of thinking that let's make this modular, let's build or design or engineer what you all have termed the crypto agility into our systems. Now when I think about the financial services specifically, and I think about this industry that you all are supporting, that system is growing in complexity with all these various third parties and vendors and financial technologies and mobile banking and services, what have you. So what are some of the best practices then in implementing the shift and governing? That's another piece, governing the shift to crypto agility for the financial services industry.
I say there's quite a few aspects to how we want to embrace this. And some of this we actually started writing on last year, even before this paper even came out. One of the basis we need to do as we start to think about this transition is an inventory. Where are we using cryptography today? Again, back to the earlier point, we have been taking cryptography as fait accompli. It just works. So we haven't been categorizing it or storing the necessary information consistently in our asset management guides, right? This is a scary question, but I've asked many financial services professionals over the last few years, how many, raise your hand in the audience if you know where 100% of your keys are, the cryptographic keys. Brandon, how many do you think have ever raised their hand?
Oh, I'm sure none of them were willing to put their reputations on the line for that.
Exactly right. And so the first step in this is get your hands around the problem. Just how many different cryptographic algorithms are we using? Old, new, et cetera. What are their key sizes? Where are we storing these keys? What does that ecosystem look like? Is that just direct from us to our customers or our consumers or callers? Is that with third parties? What does that cryptographic bill of materials look like for each of these use cases? Start to define that now, right? There's the current state processes. How often do you do your key rotations, your signature updates, your whatever it may be? You know, again, especially the larger the institution, you may have business units or divisions that may have different processes from one another. So start to normalize and understand those nuances now, right? There's also the education side, the people side of things. Again, most people just assumed the cryptography, they just took, it's going to work, don't worry about it. Now we have to educate and go, no, we need to design and think differently about cryptography. That's a very different approach for anyone in computer science or developing these systems of where am I going to authenticate? How am I going to ensure the trust and the accuracy and the authentication, the other aspects of this ecosystem?
We'll be right back. And now, a word from our sponsor, KnowBe4. It's all connected, and we're not talking conspiracy theories. When it comes to InfoSec tools, effective integrations can make or break your security stack. The same should be true for security awareness training. KnowBe4, provider of the world's largest library of security awareness training, provides a way to integrate your existing security stack tools to help you strengthen your organization's security culture. KnowBe4's Security Coach uses standard APIs to quickly and easily integrate with your existing security products from vendors like Microsoft, CrowdStrike, and Cisco, 35 vendor integrations and counting. Security Coach analyzes your security stack alerts to identify events related to any risky security behavior from your users. Use this information to set up real-time coaching campaigns targeting risky users based on those events from your network, endpoint, identity, or web security vendors. Then coach your users at the moment the risky behavior occurs, with contextual security tips delivered via Microsoft Teams, Slack, or email. Learn more at knowbe4.com/securitycoach. That's knowbe4.com/securitycoach. And we thank KnowBe4 for sponsoring our show.
Well, so, then thinking about the future state of this as we move towards a post-quantum world and rapidly towards that, which seems like the driving force that all organizations and security officers should be considering the things and the processes that you were just talking through. Do we expect, especially in an industry like the financial services, heavily regulated, heavily controlled, do we expect any regulatory changes to come that address quantum security?
I need to say that FS-ISAC is not a policy engine. We're apolitical, so we don't have much influence on that. I will say that there already are some legislation in place to do this. DORA, especially in Europe, is looking at different aspects of cryptography. The federal government in the US has asked a lot of its agencies to upgrade its infrastructure to PQC or post-quantum cryptography by fiscal year 2030. So financial services will get wrapped up into a lot of those movements.
Sure. And 2030 is not too far away.
No, it's 5 years, right?
Yeah.
Really, it's just 5 years. And that's a lot of work to do in 5 years.
It is. Well, so then, thinking about what comes next, for FS-ISAC, for the work that you do supporting the security of the financial services industry, what's next for you all in this effort around cryptographic agility, and how can institutions within your industry work with you or benefit from the work that you're doing to keep pace?
One is make the recognition that we need to start now. We need to start these inventory, the current state analysis, the risk analysis. What are the riskiest assets we need to start migrating first, right? All of these sort of things. To look at the infrastructure and go, we need to think differently and make significant investments in order to become more cryptographically agile. It would be easy for some to kick the can down the road. Look, this is not Y2K. There is no December 31st, 1999 date that says thou must be done by this date or you're done. That doesn't exist. There's recommendations. Do this in 5 years. Some vendor roadmaps have a CRQC or cryptographically relevant quantum computer in maybe 7 to 10 years. Dr. Mosca's survey shows the experts think 10 to 15. So one could say that quantum computers, though, is not the only threat. We've seen a paper last October that claimed to have broken RSA without the use of a quantum computer. Now, it was proven false, but that did that. There was also a paper in April that claimed to break lattice math, which is the fundamental basis for NIST's new post-quantum cryptography asymmetric algorithm, ML-Chem. Again, that one was found to have an error and proven false. But all this here is to say, this is the case for action. We need to start moving and start thinking this way and preparing for these transitions now. To work with us, yes, sure, our next steps are to go even deeper to the architecture that we've already proposed. We're doing work with financial services specific vendors to understand how they are ready and how they're going to integrate into the ecosystem. Because you as a firm, whether you're financial services or not, you can only own what you manage, right? You're dependent on many third or nth parties. So how are they going to all help you in your ecosystem? Have they started even to prepare? We have to look at, especially in financial services, how payment networks are all going to integrate with one another, and what are the dates we have to start doing that, or exchanges, you name it, right? It's really a lock, stock, and barrel assessment of we need to start thinking about this, planning for this now, alongside all the other investments that people have going on. There's that little artificial intelligence thing that people are making investments in. There's digital assets that people are starting to embrace, right? So there's all these other competing priorities, and this needs to be one of those competing priorities. The paper itself has two aspects to it. There's the business side or the management side, and then the technical side. So this paper can be read by many different perspectives, many different roles within the organization. The business side is more of the case for action and what you're going to expect or may expect as you embrace it. And the second side is the technical things of what is it actually going to take from an infrastructure, from a technical aspect to embrace cryptographic agility.
Well, the report is Building Cryptographic Agility in the Financial Sector, published by the FS-ISAC. We, of course, will have a link to that in the show notes. It's a great report. There is a lot in here. Mike, so great having you on the show. We will have you back soon.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me, Brandon.
Our thanks to Mike Silverman, Chief Strategy and Innovation Officer at the FS-ISAC, for joining us. The white paper is titled Building Cryptographic Agility in the Financial Sector. We'll have a link in the show notes. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you back here next time.